What's going on, guys? Billy here, and the last time that we discussed 360 cameras on this channel was back with my review video of the original Insta360 ONE X. Now, a year and a half later, almost a year and a half later, I want to discuss Insta360's ONE X2. And I know that my review video here is a little bit late on this camera because it's like 5 or 6 months old. It dropped back in October of 2020, but better late than never, because what I want to do is go over some of the reasons why I now enjoy shooting with a 360 camera, all because of the ONE X2. So one of the things that I discussed in my review video of the original Insta360 ONE X is that working with 360 footage is cumbersome, and that's because it is. If you want to share a true 360 photograph or video, then there's just not going to be a lot of options in terms of platforms that will support sharing these file types. I mean, think about it. When was the last time that you were scrolling through Facebook or YouTube, those being the two largest social media platforms that support this type of media, and you came across a 360 photograph or a 360 video? It's probably been a really long time. You see, when I was making that review video of the original Insta360 ONE X, which I actually don't have that camera anymore, I gave it to my dad so that he could capture his construction projects, but nonetheless, when I was shooting with that camera, with it being my first 360 experience, I kind of thought that everything that you shot and everything you shared had to be uploaded in that 360 file format, no matter if it was a photograph or a video. I never thought about resizing it down to the 16:9 or even 9:16 aspect ratio, but now that I'm using the ONE X2 a lot more, I finally realized that this just feels like a more versatile action camera. And granted, with this camera, there's a lot of great new features and a lot of great new software built inside to make the editing process easier and the shooting process easier, which we're going to get into here in just a little bit. So the first thing that I really want to touch on here is the camera itself, right? The build of it, because I think that they got a lot right, but I also think that there's a few flaws that make this camera feel like a step in the wrong direction from that first ONE X. So the body of the camera got a major update in the durability department because the edges are lined with this grippy rubber, and while it makes holding the camera really easy, and while the durability of the exterior has overall improved, it's still a 360 camera. Both lenses protrude from either side, so even if the camera falls and catches that rubber grip on the first bounce, one of these lenses is bound to make contact with the ground. Now, Insta360 does sell adhesive lens guards, which I believe is a first for their cameras, and while they definitely will prevent long-term scratches, they likely won't protect either of the lenses from larger falls. I've unfortunately had the experience of dropping my Insta360 ONE X, the original one, which resulted in a chip right in the center of one of the lenses, and it didn't really look all that bad when you looked at the camera, but it was very noticeable when I was looking at any of the photographs or videos that I took with the camera. So even though they definitely improved upon the durability with the ONE X2, just remember that it still is fragile with these two lenses on either side, and that's why I like to carry it around in this soft pouch, so it's pretty much always tucked inside of here, and then if I ever take it out of the case, I'll just lay it right on top. Now, staying on the topic of durability, the entire camera was made waterproof, which is an absolute must for action style cameras like this is trying to be. To achieve this waterproofing, some design changes were made, like the watertight flaps covering the ports and this new battery that's built right into the exterior of the outer edge of the camera, so when you take the battery out, there's no door to fumble with. The door itself is built into the battery. The rest of the buttons around the camera, of course, are now waterproof too, with a nice seal around the edges. There are two things about the design of this camera that irritate me though, and while they are relatively smaller issues, some would say that I'm probably just nitpicking, I figured I'd mention them here in this video. So the first thing is that the SD card slot is located behind the battery door. So in order to access the memory card, the SD card slot, you've got to totally kill power from the camera. While that's probably not a big issue if you're getting home and offloading footage, it is kind of annoying if you're actively connected to your phone and you've got to switch SD cards, you've then got to reconnect to your phone. And I guess I understand why Insta360 did this, because now it further protects this camera from water, right? Because they've got it hidden behind this nice water sealed door that is the battery, and they don't have to have another SD card slot that needs to be further waterproofed. But the original Insta360 ONE X had it right on the bottom, and it made it really easy while the camera was in the pouch to just grab the SD card, and it kept the camera protected. So again, while it's a relatively small issue, something I figured I'd bring up. Now, the final thing I want to mention, which is probably even further of a nitpick, is the fact that the USB-C port is so high up on the camera, because when I charge my camera, I like to make sure it's protected. I don't just want to leave it out sitting on the camera with the lenses sitting on the table with the lenses exposed. I want to keep it inside of its pouch, and now I don't have all that much room to play with, whereas with that original Insta360 ONE X, the port was further down towards the bottom. So again, probably two things that I'm just nitpicking about, but I figured I'd mention them here in this video. Looking at the camera overall though, I've got to take my hat off to Insta360 for a really well-designed camera in the ONE X2. The general feel is really premium, and this full color screen is a big upgrade over the OLED screen that came in the first version of the ONE X. I guess this would be a good time to segue into the companion app interface as well as the built-in screen interface, because Insta360 has done a really good job at making capturing, editing, and sharing content from this camera really easy. So a common method employed by action camera companies is to use a companion app to control the settings and shooting mode of your camera. You can usually preview the live video too, which is really helpful, but I really love when there is a decent set of controls added to the camera itself for changing settings and framing shots on the fly. That original Insta360 ONE X only had one button to cycle through modes and menus on the camera, so using the companion app was pretty much mandatory. This go around though, the circular screen on the side of the camera is really helpful for changing settings, cycling modes, and even framing up shots. I guess you could say that framing a shot isn't really necessary when you are capturing video in 360 degrees, but when you cycle over to what Insta360 calls their Steadicam mode, or the wide angle mod, where it uses only one lens to sort of transform from a 360 camera to a traditional action camera, it really does come in handy. I'll get more into this when we talk about shooting with the ONE X2. Now, the ease of use extends from the interface of the camera's built-in screen to the companion application, and it is super easy to pair up with a previously linked camera from your smartphone. I'd venture to say that as long as you're just shooting with the camera, you probably won't need to break out your phone and connect it to the camera, because all of the stuff here on the main interface, like the shooting mode, the color profile, exposure profile, and all of that stuff can be easily controlled right through the screen, right on the camera. The biggest benefits that using the app really introduces is through live streaming and image editing. Now, this has always been a pain point for me, editing 360 images. Remembering what I said in my review video of the ONE X, like I said, I was so wrapped around the fact that it was a 360 camera, and I was focused on shooting 360 photos and shooting 360 images and sharing those as 360 photo and video files so people could view them in 360. But now, after I've really extensively used the ONE X2, I've come to the realization that, like I said in the beginning of the video, it's a more versatile action camera. It's something that you can just stick out there, and because it's recording all around, it's going to capture something that's great. And that means that it lowers the skill level required to get really cool looking photos and videos with this camera. You've just got to make sure you've got it out there, you've got it on that invisible selfie stick capturing you while you're snowboarding or while you're skiing, and you're going to get something that looks really cool no matter what. You're going to get that frame looking straight ahead as you're skiing down the mountain, or if you're, say, on your electric skateboard, you're going to get that view back to yourself as you're kind of carving around different corners. So you don't have to have all that much skill to get really cool looking photos and videos. You just put it out there, you capture whatever is around the camera, and then you've got to then edit that video and then reframe it. Now, staying on the topic of editing, you still have to edit the 360 video that you capture, but the changes made within Insta360's app have made all of the difference in my workflow. In fact, I would go as far as saying I'd rather edit within the app rather than on my computer, because it feels more user-friendly and certainly is more feature-rich. You can choose how you want to view the footage, you can trim it, you can add keyframes, you can adjust the exposure and color, you can add on filters and those speed tags to show like how fast you're going or which direction you're moving. There's also a menu with a lot of smaller settings in regards to object tracking, stabilization, direction lock, different stitching methods, and so on. The one small complaint that I have here though is that if you don't download the files directly to your phone, then you're editing video over the air from the card on your camera, which is never really efficient. I have the iPhone 12 Pro Max, which should be able to handle some pretty serious photo and video editing, but the app gets hung up pretty frequently. If this is something that annoys you, you can use Insta360's studio software for the computer, but this interface has remained virtually unchanged for the past, I think, like 3 years. Don't get me wrong, it does get the job done and is usually more powerful than the app because you have a larger device to edit off of, but like I said a little bit ago, it's not as user-friendly and it certainly doesn't pack as many cool features as the Insta360 app. Okay, so up until this point, we've been really focused on talking about how this camera works and what it looks like, but now we're transitioning into probably the most important section of the video, and that is what the shooting experience is like with the ONE X2, because it's very unique. It's not like shooting with your smartphone, it's not like shooting with a traditional action camera, it's almost addicting. I mean, I've really had a lot of fun shooting with this camera over the past couple of months, and it's definitely earned a spot in the top slot or the top section of my backpack so I can quickly grab it on the go and shoot what's around me. At first, I was really hell-bent on getting the best image quality possible. I'm a camera nerd, so I think it's really easy to start caring about the specs, image resolution, eliminating noise, finding the best light, and all of that stuff that I would really stress over. But I decided to put all of that out of the picture and just focus on capturing what I wanted. And surprisingly, it was a lot more freeing experience. I think that thought process definitely came as a result of the nature of this camera being a 360 camera, because I couldn't possibly control the lighting in every single direction. I couldn't control the composition in every single direction. But remember, you don't have to worry as much about the composition when you're shooting, but instead you just reframe the 360 video at the end so that you can capture exactly what you want. And at the end of the day, like I said, it was a freeing experience. It was something that felt really unique, and it kind of just took the stress out of shooting. I was just kind of having fun. I had the camera with me, and then after the fact, I could sift through my footage and edit and show what I wanted. Now, I'm not a huge action sports guy, so I don't have any badass footage taken from this camera on jet skis. I didn't get a chance to take it skiing with me, and I certainly didn't feel comfortable trying to mount it to myself during an ice hockey game that I recently played in. But using it to mess around on my boosted board to capture myself was pretty fun. Using the invisible selfie stick is really wild because even though you might catch it from its shadow, it's completely invisible in the video. So by holding it out in front of you or behind you, it looks like there's actually someone there holding a camera and filming you. Where I think I've really gotten the most use out of this camera is using a suction cup mount to mount it to the outside and the inside of my car, which you might be wondering, why wouldn't I just use a traditional action camera? But the results that came from using this were pretty cool. Just to give you an example, the first spot that I mounted this camera to was on the side of my car to capture the wheel well, and I immediately saw a lot of upside to using a 360 camera instead of a traditional action camera. So I was able to get a super wide angle field of view. I was also able to reframe the shot in post as I needed to, and the camera midway through actually shifted backwards a little bit on the outside because of the high winds, but you probably didn't notice that because it's capturing video all the way around. If I was using a traditional action camera and the lens shifted in any way, my shot would ultimately be ruined. Another thing I've been really enjoying about shooting with the ONE X2 is Insta360's flow state electronic image stabilization. Yes, that is a mouthful, but I think that they do electronic image stabilization in their cameras a lot better than some of the other action camera companies. So I think that flow state is better than like DJI's Rocksteady and GoPro's Hypersmooth, but I think that that comes with this being a 360 camera, right? It's capturing so much more real estate, so no matter which direction you face it in, it's capturing video, whereas when you're using like the Osmo Action, for example, it's capturing a 16:9 image and it's got to stabilize that 16:9 image, whereas this is capturing video everywhere. So again, I think it has a little bit of an unfair advantage, but hey, maybe that's a reason you'd want to pick up a 360 camera over a conventional action camera. Like, check this out. If we go back to this example, you can see just how much the car moves when going over bumps and making turns. You can even see how crazy the camera was shaking from the wind because of how much the suction cup mount looks like it's vibrating there on the side of the screen. From here, I placed the camera around a few other spots on the car to get some pretty cool views, like on the hood of the car to kind of look back towards the top of the roof, but then also rotate around to look forwards towards the front, so to see where my car was driving. But by far, my favorite angle was inside of the car, suction cupped to the glass roof. This super wide angle that's captured from the 360 camera shows so much inside of the car, and of course the stabilization smooths out all of the bumps, so it really does look cool to see all the trees passing by through the roof as well as on the side of the car. Now, something else I've been using this camera for recently is the wide angle mod, so I've been holding it almost like a point and shoot camera. Remember, this lets you shoot with just one of the lenses, almost like a traditional action camera, and it's cool to use to just capture what's going on directly in front of you. The stabilization is still on point, and the built-in screen really helps to make sure that you keep what it is that you're shooting in frame, which in this case is my dog acting like a complete nut. The wide angle mod is also cool because you can switch to the lens that's facing you and use the screen on the camera to frame yourself up. Whether you're taking a selfie or whether you're shooting a vlog and you want to film yourself, it's hard to think of something that this camera can't do. Now, there are a couple of gripes I have with the wide angle mod. For one, I think it's a little bit too wide at 150 degrees. So I've got the camera about 1.5 feet away from my face. But if I extend my arm out, it now feels like I'm a football field away from the camera. I also kind of wish that the microphones were a little bit better in this camera. So we do have the upgraded quad array mic system, but for some reason it feels a little bit too over processed and almost too loud in a sense. But regardless, this is still a great camera to capture your everyday life with. Look, at the end of the day, this camera is all about fun. It's all about making shooting video and shooting photos fun. I feel like when Insta360 and all their engineers got together to make the ONE X2 camera, they said, okay, what features do we want? Let's compile a list of everything we want to make this camera do. And like the head engineer just said, yes, like we want every single feature inside of this camera. I mean, if you go onto their website and you just scroll down the product page, they've got a list of so many things included. Apple Watch control, voice control, different shooting modes, easy editing features, fun effects you can add to your video. I mean, the list seriously just goes on and on and on for what feels like forever. I would be here for hours explaining and going over all the different features built into this camera. Even after shooting with it for a couple of months, I feel like I have barely scratched the surface. It's really easy to recommend a camera like this to almost anybody that I know because it doesn't matter how skilled you are with the camera. As I've said multiple times, it's all about having fun. You don't have to be an absolute professional to get really good looking photos and videos with this camera. You just need to be somebody that relatively knows how to work an app to edit your 360 video after the fact to really get some cool looking shots with this camera. And with that said, I can't wait to see how Insta360 continues to build onto this camera because it seems like they come out with a lot of great features over the course of a lifespan of a camera. So in 6 months from now, we might have a totally different camera with a lot of great new features. And of course, I'll be covering that in the future if that is the case. Anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think of the Insta360 ONE X2 down in the comment section below. And as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.